The storm had been raging across Theta Station for 3 cycles now, and Sarah had learned to read the weather patterns like a native. The atmospheric processors were failing again, 3rd time this month, and the wind screamed through the colony's outer sectors with enough force to strip paint from hull plating. She pulled her thermal jacket tighter as she made her rounds through the agricultural dome. Most species in the galaxy had the good sense to stay indoors during storms like this. Humans apparently had never developed that particular survival instinct. That's when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. Katniss paused, her breath fogging in the frigid air. There it was again, a high-pitched keening that made her chest tighten. She'd heard enough distress calls in her 5 years as a xenobiologist to recognize genuine terror. Following the sound led her to the maintenance tunnel near the dome's eastern support column. The entrance was barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, and the darkness inside was absolute. She activated her wrist light, sweeping the beam across corroded pipes and tangled cables. 2 eyes reflected back at her, amber and slitted, set in a small triangular face covered in silver-gray fur. The creature pressed itself against the tunnel wall, trembling violently. "Well, hello there," Katniss whispered, recognizing the species immediately. A Kyrathi cub, no more than 3 or 4 months old, young enough to still have its kitten spots, old enough to have wandered away from its parents. The Kyrathi were apex predators on their homeworld, bipedal felines with retractable claws, enhanced reflexes, and a bite force that could crush bone. Adult Kyrathi made even the most hardened human marines nervous. This one was barely the size of a house cat, and it was terrified. Katniss knew the protocols. Call xenofauna control, let the professionals handle it, maintain a safe distance from potentially dangerous wildlife. She'd written half those protocols herself. Instead, she knocked once on the metal pipe beside her. The cub's ears flattened against its skull and it hissed, a tiny, pathetic sound that broke Katniss's heart. But it was watching her now, amber eyes fixed on her face. "I know," she said softly. "The storm's scary. You're lost, aren't you? Can't find your way back to your parents." The cub's pupils dilated. In Kyrathi body language, that meant confusion or curiosity. Good signs, both of them. Katniss slowly extended her hand, palm down, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. Every instinct in her xenobiological training screamed at her to reconsider. Kyrathi cubs were still equipped with needle-sharp claws and teeth. They were still predators even at this age. But Katniss had spent enough time among the stars to understand something most species didn't. Fear looked the same in every language. "It's okay," she murmured. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cub took a tentative step forward, then stopped. Its small body shook with each gust of wind that howled through the tunnel. Katniss could see the exhaustion in its movements, the way it struggled to stay upright. She waited. Patience was a human virtue that had served her well among alien species. Where others saw threats and danger, Katniss had learned to see individuals, scared, lost, and desperately seeking safety. After what felt like an eternity, the cub moved. It crept forward on unsteady legs, its spotted tail dragging behind it. When it reached Katniss's outstretched hand, it paused again, sniffing cautiously. Then, with a soft mewling sound that no apex predator should ever make, the Kyrathi cub crawled into her arms. Katniss felt its tiny claws prick through her jacket as it climbed up her chest and buried its face in the crook of her neck. The cub's whole body trembled against her, and she could feel its rapid heartbeat pulsing like a hummingbird's wings. "There we go," she whispered, carefully cradling the small predator. "You're safe now." She stood slowly, mindful of her precious cargo, and made her way back through the tunnel. The storm continued to rage outside, but the cub didn't flinch. It pressed closer to Katniss's warmth. Its purring, a sound that registered below human hearing but vibrated through her chest, gradually steadying. The xenofauna control team found them 20 minutes later, in the agricultural dome's break room. Katniss sat on a bench with the Kyrathi cub still clutched in her arms, now sound asleep. Neo, the station's head of security and a Kyrathi himself, stood in the doorway, all 7 feet of him. His silver fur was darker than the cub's, his build that of a seasoned warrior, the kind of being that could tear through reinforced steel with his bare claws. "That," he said, his voice a deep rumble that bordered on a growl, "is Ambassador Shirak's daughter." Katniss looked down at the sleeping cub. "Oh." She wandered away from their quarters during the storm. "The ambassador has been—" Neo paused, searching for the right word. "Distressed." I can imagine. Neo approached slowly, his movements careful despite his size. He looked at the cub in Katniss's arms, then at Katniss herself. She came to you willingly. I knocked once, Katniss said with a small shrug. Then I waited. Something shifted in Neo's expression, surprise, respect, or perhaps both. Most species would have called for help immediately, or run. Most species don't understand that sometimes the scariest thing in the room is just a kid who wants their parent. Neo was quiet for a moment. Then in his own language, a series of clicks and low growls that Katniss had studied but never quite mastered, he said something that sounded formal, ritualistic. When he switched back to common, his voice was softer. The ambassador will want to thank you personally. What you did, approaching a Kyrathi cub, offering comfort, it's not something we expect from other species. It requires, he gestured with one clawed hand, understanding, bravery. Katniss looked down at the small bundle of fur and claws in her arms. Or maybe just the ability to recognize when someone needs help, regardless of how many teeth they have. The cub stirred, making a small chirping sound in its sleep. Its tiny paw flexed against Katniss's shoulder, claws extending and retracting in the instinctive kneading motion all feline species seem to share across the galaxy. Neo reached out carefully and lifted his daughter. Katniss felt the weight of responsibility lift as he cradled the cub against his chest. You know, he said, there's a Kyrathi saying, the pack knows its protectors not by their claws, but by their courage to comfort the young. He paused at the doorway, the sleeping cub secure in his arms. Thank you, Katniss, for seeing a child instead of a predator. After they left, Katniss sat in the quiet break room, listening to the storm finally begin to subside outside. She thought about all the species she'd encountered in her years among the stars, the ones who saw humans as weak, soft, lacking the natural weapons evolution had granted to so many others. Maybe that was true. Maybe humans didn't have claws or armor or venom, but they had something else, something that made a young predator lost and afraid trust them enough to seek comfort in their arms. And sometimes that was the greatest strength of all.